don't use legal or technical terms. We all fall victim to this. I'm going to use the term a lot in this session, PIO, Court PIO, Public Information Officer. When I go to the Court PIO conference, nobody even explains that. But when I'm talking to somebody on the street, I can't say PIO because not everybody knows that. There are so many terms. I just explained to somebody the other day, they say, how would I know when the juvenile sentencing is? And I said, well, it's a disposition. Did the judge not mention the date at the conclusion of the trial? Oh, that's what a disposition is. So think about if you're using any terms that are unique, that are legal or that are unique to your courthouse. In my courthouse, we have step backs, we have show causes. Nobody knows what these are. Nobody knows what those are, other than those people who work in that courthouse. This is another big one. Keep confidences with reporters. If a reporter says, I have a scoop that this happened, I don't go tell two other reporters, even if this one isn't the greatest person, I don't like them so much, but I like this one, don't. Because when somebody tells you a confidence, you get to learn something. You can prepare yourself. Maybe it's just tell somebody in the arraignment court it's going to be busy today. But you get a chance to prepare yourself. You build trust with that reporter. And if you tell somebody else, if you get rid of their scoop, they're never going to tell you another secret. I mean, we've all learned that lesson. So that is a really important point. And I know some courts have PIOs and some courts do not. If you have a PIO, and this is my one of my 2 or 3 little blurbs in favor, or my little ads in favor of PIOs, public service announcements. Please keep your PIO informed. Please let them know what's going on. It is so much easier, even if you just have 5 minutes warning, to think about what you're going to say as a PIO when a reporter calls and asks you about something. So please keep them informed. And I'll tell you later, if you don't have a PIO, our organization is here to help you. If you handle those duties for your court, you can join our organization. We have online listserv, and we're now on Slack, which is sort of like a group texting platform on the web. We answer each other's questions, we help each other out, and there are a number of members who are court administrators in smaller courts where they don't have a PIO, and they find it very helpful. Defining media. This is something that the PIOs have been talking about for the past several years. We have now in DC neighborhood blogs. They've broken a couple of stories. We had a blog that just covered one trial, and they actually were the definitive source of information on that trial. It was a very sensational trial in DC. Some courts credential media, some don't. DC does not. I think it's very hard to find a way to define media that's effective, because you may say, oh, we're going to do it based on the circulation or the number of subscribers. There are, like the legal newspaper in DC, which is no longer, but that newspaper had a circulation of like 19,000. Do you have any idea, like, the number of subscribers? Some girl who teaches you how to put mascara on, like, she has millions of subscribers. You know, there's like stupid pet tricks, millions of subscribers. So there's a joke with the court PIOs, like some guy in his pajamas in his mother's basement has millions of subscribers. Like, you can't do it based on that. Do you do it if they have an editor or not? Credentialing has its advantages, but it is challenging, and to draw a bright line that is fair. And you need to think about, if you're going to give media different access than the public, how to define it and then how to justify it. One thing I would say is put things in writing. If you have a policy that you can turn to, that is incredibly helpful. Okay, so now let's turn to, we're going to start to try to get our story, our accomplishments, our new initiatives, we're going to try to get those out to the public. The two traditional, we have a question? Sorry, didn't see you.
Can I ask you how you define your bloggers, or what do you have in place now to define whether a blogger is a credential?
You certainly can. I do not, DC Courts does not have a policy about what press is. So on rare occasions, we do reserve seating for press in a particular courtroom. And there are a couple of neighborhood bloggers that are definitely news bloggers. I don't remember them trying to get into a trial. I do remember this blog that covered one particular trial that was like a 2-month judge trial. And they wrote a letter in advance, and they were both, coincidentally, particular to this process, former journalists, and they said, here's what we want to do, here's why, we will abide by all the rules. And so we did not do a bright line test. There are other jurisdictions. Jeff and Marianne, where's Marianne? I can't even see. Do you have rules?
We do have rules, but...
Nevada.
We do
Las
have
Vegas.
rules, but when it comes to bloggers, we tend to err on the side of allowing bloggers and question, what might not be mainstream media, because it's really not worth the aggravation that you get when they start to raise concerns that they're not being allowed in. Generally, we're an open court. We tend to be very, very open about most of that. So if there's a blogger who may be on the line, we usually err on the side of allowing them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know if everybody could hear at the beginning, but they have bloggers applied. They generally err on the side of inclusion, because you want to be open, you want to be transparent, you want to make sure you're not violating the First Amendment. Jeff, Utah?
So we do have a definition of a news reporter strictly for camera access, but that definition is essentially very broad, and we actually invited a whole group of representatives of most of the major news outlets to consult with us. So we should try to settle on that, as well as media attorneys that represent media quite often, and that was actually key because they're a trusted voice in the professional media community, and they wanted to leave it as broad as possible to include bloggers as well.
I do know there have been issues with a website wanting, if courts have rules that, courts with cameras, not mine, courts with that allow cameras, the first person who applies is the pool camera, the camera that's going to be shared, their video is shared with everybody, and so then the local TV station is like, well, we don't like their camera, and their videographer isn't good, whatever. So that's an issue to watch, how to handle, if you do first come, first serve, there's going to be a time where people aren't going to be happy, although that might provide them incentive to call you earlier. So we had another question, yes?
Yeah, sorry, back to a second for the plain language and not using the court terms. I know within the legal, for lawyers, they've been trying to push that for at least a decade, and it's not going anywhere. So do you practice defining the word to try to educate the media and the public, so still using it, but that when they're showing up at the courthouse, without you, that they go, oh, I know what a pro se is, or I know what a JIP is.
We do have a glossary. We do try to, in our website, to say unrepresented party as opposed to pro se. It is a challenge. I mean, those of you who are lawyers know, lawyers love legal terms. They may conceptually think, I conceptually think that I should get up and jog 5 miles every morning. I conceptually believe that. The practice is slightly different. So I think it's a challenge. I think glossaries on your website are helpful, but again, not everybody does that. You have to think about this, to court managers, I would say, when you're doing a summons, when you're the piece of paper that gets handed somebody in arraignment court, here's your next court appearance. Really make sure, in our courthouse, we say show cause so often that people forget that it means, this is a hearing to show cause why you should not be held in contempt for failing to do something you were ordered to. That is a whole long explanation. You're in trouble. You need to show up. It's not quite how we want to word it, but you need to make sure that it's really understandable and take a moment to step back, which is another phrase from DC, step back, which means be taken into the cell block, but you need to try to think about things from a different perspective. And are there any terms in here that I know because I work at the courthouse, because I deal with the law, because I am a lawyer? Just try to be really careful about that. I agree, that's a continual effort.
Is that something you do with your social media, like a legal word of the day?
I haven't. I did a couple of years ago, and we could do this again. I did a did you know? But it was more things like, did you know that we have domestic violence intake centers, both at the courthouse and across town? Did you know all DC judges live in the District of Columbia? So, do you know we have a crime victims compensation program? But that is something that I think would be good to have, and it's a good tweet. It's a really good tweet. One of the things, if you have explanatory materials, is trying to get them out. If we came up with a really good glossary, I would try to make like little videos if we could, and have those on our YouTube page and have those on our website, and just trying to get to people in as many different ways. And now that I'm thinking, it would be really good to have signage in the courthouse with this. There are many approaches, and one of my messages here is don't use one way to communicate. That is like speaking one language in the world community. We're all English speakers, so we tend to do that anyway, but like really think about, I think courts in the last decade or two have started doing dual signage. Think about that in terms of communicating with, like, I have a 26-year-old son. If I email him, he may get back to me 3 months from now because he's not going to check his email. Like, he's texting, and if I want to reach him, I text him. If I have like a document to send him, I email it to him, and then I say, go check your email. Hi, by the way, he's watching. Didn't know I'd talk about you. Okay, so press advisories and releases. These are the traditional ways of getting information out. So the difference, at least in my mind, and probably other people have different definitions, but to me an advisory advises press of something that's going to happen, especially an event. It's going to happen in the future. You're essentially inviting them, you're telling about it, and it really should be short and sweet. Although, in general, let's have any communication, public communications, press communications, err on the side of short and sweet as opposed to long and legal. Anytime a judge tells you to drop a footnote, ignore them. Do not drop a footnote. Okay, press releases essentially are for reporters to use if they don't come to the event, or if they do, but you're providing more information. You're essentially helping them write their story, okay? And you may think, I don't want to, I've heard judges say this, I don't want to have to spoon feed them. They should do their own work. Okay, fine, yeah, they should, whatever. If you want them to write a good story, if you want certain things included in that story, make it as easy as possible for them to get that information. By the way, we have, at the DC courts, we have 10 different self-help centers. If you want that noticed, put that, it might be 8, but I think it's 10. Put that in your press release. Have a quote from the chief judge saying, we're so pleased to open our latest self-help center. You have the data. X number of people have been helped in the last X number of years. Here's how many pro se parties have been given an advantage by this. So think about what facts and figures would be helpful, what quotes, and also, great thing to do is for more information. Like I just did a press release last month on a drug court graduation. So I had a quote, we talked about the graduation, but it's like 11 graduates, and also, I'm not going to name them or interview them in the press release. But at the bottom, I said, for more information about DC's drug court, here's a link to find out more about the program, because a press release, anything I send out is only 1 page. And at the bottom, I had a link to the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. Like, they have a great page with with data about how effective drug courts are. So really with press releases, you are helping somebody write a good story, and good by your definition or our definition. Okay, sample advisories, and by the way, sorry about the ovals, but I didn't want to be identifying in such a public way who I thought and this is about 5 years old, but who did the bad advisory. And of course I pat myself on the back that we did a great advisory. But you can see it's just like who, what, where, when, and then at the bottom it's sort of slipping off the page. It's like a paragraph of text. And so this one was, we were video streaming arguments on a particular day. So then notice like link to where it's going to be, and list the cases, and then I might have had like a sentence or two about, one case is a zoning appeal and another is a criminal conviction appeal. You want to be short and sweet. What I didn't like about this one is I just felt there was like all this information screaming at you, and I want one bold headline, not a sentence, 6 to 8 words, 10 words, whatever. Just boom, here's what it's about. And really think like visually how it looks, and whether if you just, somebody used to tell me this about resumes. If you look for 1 second, do you know what it's about? Do you get the gist of it? Okay, sample press release. Again, short and concise headline. If you need a second line underneath it with a little more information, that's okay, I wouldn't bold it. You want a summary paragraph or two, and then you want a quote. I think it's always helpful to, when you send the draft to your chief judge, instead of just saying, so send me a quote, chief judges tend to be busy, I like to send them a suggested quote. They edit it, they do whatever, it's, ultimately it's their words, but at least, give them a sense of, and don't put any legal words in there. Okay, so, rules for press releases and advisories. Start with the big news. I remember years ago, a PIO from a state that shall remain unnamed said that her chief judge wanted to build to a crescendo on page 3. There's I just recently saw some joke. Do you know where to hide a dead body? Page 3 of the Google search results. Like, don't build to a crescendo. Boom, start with it and then fill in the details. Let's see, you make it easy to read. I think this is, because you want, it's going to go to reporters. Let's hope that they actually have, college educations. But it's also going to go to members of the public, potentially. And also, well, we went over legal terms. Don't overcrowd the page. There's a writer, I think it might have been Jane Austen. Somebody said, I don't have time for a short letter, so a long one will have to do. It takes a while to get a long letter or a long press release down to a short press release. Try to. I've seen online, they now have, if you're looking at like a news website, they'll say, 5 minutes to read, 7 minutes to read. Which is a little, I think it's a little scary about our culture. Oh my God, it's a 14-minute article. Who cares about, world affairs? And then lastly, I would, when I do a press release, I email it out, I post it on our website, I put a link to it on Facebook, I put a tweet about, DC Court of Appeals is live streaming oral arguments on Thursday, and then I put a link to the press release on the website. So again, you can look at how many people are on Twitter, how many people are on Facebook, how many people, whatever. The more platforms that you put it on, you're getting it to traditional media. So that's TV, radio, newspapers, maybe some news blogs. Okay, but then Facebook, Twitter, you can get it out in a number of ways. I know not all courts are on social media, but by the end of this, I hope I'll have you convinced that it's worth. I hope I'll have converts. Okay, dealing effectively with media. So, how to get good stories placed. First and foremost, if you see the media as the enemy, and we'll give them a piece of bread or a few crumbs whenever we have to, but other than that, forget it, and we're at odds with them, it's not going to go well. So really think about letting them know of positive things, helping them out. I used to say my job as a PIO was 80% being nice and helpful, and this is because, of course, I am a very nice and helpful person. But also, more so, it's because there are two situations where you're going to need press. And if you're the person who's always helpful, like you send them a copy of a document or public document, or you explain what a term means, or why did the person was found guilty, why didn't they sentence today? Why does it take 2 months to have a sentencing date? Just explaining basic procedures, providing documents, whatever, that builds you goodwill. And as Marianne said the other day, good relationships, goodwill is like a bank. You have to put the deposit in before you start withdrawing on it. So I'm helpful 80% of the time, that's my deposit, for 10% reasons. One is, sometimes I really want press to do a story. I would like them to cover, they all know this, Adoption Day. This is a big thing for me. Every November we do Adoption Day. I want that story. Is any reporter going to get in trouble because, oh my God, you didn't cover Adoption Day? You missed that big scoop? No, they're going to miss, that somebody was sentenced or that somebody pled out. That they need to know about. We don't have to cover Adoption Day or Youth Lawfare or our new Pro Se clinic. They do not get in trouble for not doing that. But I feel like I want them to have this attitude of like, I'm going to help Leah out. She's always helpful. So that's how, to me, that's how, you also make the stories look attractive. You show why readers will be interested in them. But also, like, people know. You got to show up for Adoption Day. Leah says you got to show up for Adoption Day. That's really important. It also helps when there's a negative story to have reporters feel compelled to take your call and to explain what the situation was, what the context is. I've had a couple of situations where the judge really held a series of hearings, asked all the right questions, and now the way that facts played out, it looks like the judge didn't even care, and now look what happened. And somebody's dead or somebody's injured, and it's horrible. It doesn't take away from that, but I want them to take my call, and I want them to know, like, look, here's what actually happened. There's a context. There are some things that happen that you can't explain and that better not to not say. But oftentimes when I get a call and it sounds like the judge did something, oh my God, are you kidding? And look at this horrible result. There's actually a lot of context. And I want the reporters to feel compelled to take my call and to trust me that if I say, here's what happened, they'll believe me, and they can ask, I want to see a transcript or whatever. That's fine. I get it. But cultivating positive relationships is incredibly important. Next couple of points. Understand their deadlines. They're working under really tight time frames now. And by the way, yes, the reporters are all 22. They're right out of journalism school. No, they've never been to a courthouse before. Just assume that. So help them out. They're trying. Keep track of positive stories. Every once in a while. Doesn't happen that often, but I'll get a reporter saying, I love this question. So what's going on down there today? We have like 100 courtrooms in our courthouse. I have no idea. I usually rely on press calling me to know that somebody's been arrested, there's going to be a big arraignment. Really, there's a trial next week? I should prepare. Every once in a while a judge tells me, but any positive stories. During part of our new judge training, there's a session on dealing with the press. And fortunately, and this is great best practice, I'm included in that training session, and one of the things I say is, first of all, really tell me if anything bad happens in your courtroom. Tell me if you're going to issue, in a civil case, for instance, if you're going to issue a decision that's major, let me know. And by the way, 4:30 on Friday, not the greatest time. But I tell them, like, if anything bad happens, let me know. If anything major happens. And then also, if something nice happens, tell us. People love those stories now. I mean, first of all, we have a lot of negative news, and that combats that, but people really like the stories about some really kind thing or nice thing or happy thing that happened in your courthouse. And I guess the next point, see if, try to remind the judges, anything good happens, let me know. And of course, the same thing to staff and judges. Please let me know if anything unfortunate happens, I'd like to think about how we're going to respond. I may need to ask a few people, can we respond? But the more time I have to plan, and no, I don't tell the press. If you tell me this happened, we're hoping it doesn't get to the press, fine. That, you know, occasionally, just rarely, we have an assault that takes place in a courtroom. And, you know, it's often family cases, there's, you know, high emotions, but let me know, because I'm going to start thinking, can I say anything or not? Probably not, because if that assault gets charged as a crime, the trial is going to be in our courthouse, but keep me posted. Okay, so,
Here's the mic.
there we go. This is something that we started doing 4 or 5 years ago, one second, and this is part of me keeping the court staff informed, and staff and judges, and it has 2 purposes. One, let's hope that they're informed about what happens in the courthouse, because, you know, if you're in criminal division, there's a big civil case. Might be good if you knew that. Also, it lets people know that I actually am doing something. And if something bad happens in the court, we had something, I'm not going to go into the details, but we had something where a clerk did something that was kind of showed that she was not the most educated person. And we got that story, it got a lot of press, but it didn't ever name her. And that was my big thing. I didn't want her to be named, because it was just a lack of knowledge about something. Do we have a question back here?
Yeah, for courts that don't already have a PIO and who don't have established relationships with the media and are maybe only appearing in stories when something bad happens, do you have tips for them on how to reach out and start fostering those relationships with their local media?
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna ask Jeff also to chime in. I would find somebody and just designate them. I mean, you probably already have, but designate somebody to be the person who deals with the press. And it doesn't mean they're going to spend all sorts of time, they have to write X number of press releases per week or whatever. Just the person who's going to be, if reporters have questions. Because let me just tell you, you could get a high-profile trial tomorrow. You don't know, but you could. And you want somebody to have some idea. So first of all, designate that person. Second of all, have them go to ccpio.org. The Court PIO website, ccpio.org. But then also, I would just do basic outreach to, you know, the person who usually reports on crime from each of the television stations in the area, the newspaper or 2 newspapers, probably just 1. And if there's like an all-news radio or an NPR station, I would just have them do a call. And the other thing, I actually didn't put this in here, is there's something that we in the PIO trade call law school for journalists. My advertisement for it is it's 2 hours instead of 3 years. But we call them in and we just we invite them in and we just sit down and I have somebody explain, so when somebody's arrested, what happens next? And we go through, you know, arraignment, plea, or charging, pretrial hearings, release or detention, pleas, trials, sentencing, the whole process. We don't actually do civil so much, there's not a huge press interest, and then we do domestic violence and juvenile. But that's a great way, and that's, I mean, you have to line up who's going to speak, and it takes, you know, 2 hours and sending a press release in advance, but that gets a lot of goodwill. Just having a person with a phone number and email that they can reach out to and just ask simple questions to, that will definitely help. Jeff, do you want to talk about what you've done?
Yeah, also in addition to law school journalists, seeking the endorsement or the participation of your local chapter of society professional journalists really helps as well. It lends some legitimacy. But there's a couple of states, including the state of Utah, that actually have a bench media committee. It's an advisory committee where there are representatives of every major news outlet in your state, as well as representative judges for every level of your courts. And it provides a forum, so you're not in the middle of a crisis news story and and you're trying to like make sure that they get it right and we get it right and everything else like that. But just sitting down outside of that and just hashing out and just having a conversation about how things go. Are they getting the information they need? Are we giving them the information that they need, that we want them to have? It just creates a more neutral territory to handle that.
It's also a good, like, if you can find a good moderator to say, what's the most annoying thing that the other party does? It may not change that, but at least know. Like, one of the judges would say, so they walk in for 10 minutes of a trial, and then they'll write an article about it. So telling reporters, you really need to sit there for more than 10 minutes. And the reporter said, uniformly, bench conferences. The attorney would say, may I approach? Because they wanted to say the defendant had a mental health condition or a medical condition, which should not be broadcast in open court, is not public. But then while they're up there saying, okay, so can we do this next Tuesday, and I want to do this, and I think he's going to, and they're having, essentially they're having the whole hearing at the bench because they got up there and they can hear each other really well. So that doesn't mean we don't have any more, the bench conferences are all 30 seconds, and it doesn't mean every reporter stays through the whole trial, but at least think about it. Be aware of the concern. Okay. So, yes?
I just want to...
Sorry, excuse me.
And by the way, my Vanna White impersonator is Jeff Fatah from the Utah Supreme Court, Utah court system. Thank you.
I just want to kind of give you a tip, too. I'm the deputy court administrator in Prescott, but I'm also the PIO. So it is so important to have a central point of contact for somebody because you don't want the staff or the media reaching out to staff.
You really don't.
No. And we had an incident where a bailiff was going off the record and providing information to media. Now, if you have a relationship, if that central point of contact has a relationship with the media knows to go to that person rather than just go to staff to try to get the scoop. And you may want to consider a policy where staff does not speak with media. They refer the media to that central point of contact. So I think that's very important to have that. And as Leah said, the relationship, if that person can establish a great working relationship with the media, it makes your life just a whole lot easier.
I will say this, and this is, there are several DC court staffers here, and thank you for joining us. This is not a reflection on them. First of all, there's the Washington Post reporter, who I hope isn't watching, but would be proud of this statement probably. I think he knows courtroom phone numbers, and he'll call courtroom clerks. And first of all, inappropriate. Second of all, the courtroom clerks they have a lot of work to do. They have a busy job. They do not need to be known. Who was it that pled out? And is he held? Like, sit in the courtroom, reporter. Also, people don't always realize, one of the reasons I tell judges, like, you're a judge, you get to decide what your policy is in your chambers about how to handle press calls. But one of the reasons I strongly suggest you send the calls to me is, what if they want to say to you, what's your policy on X? And 9 other judges have been asked and said one thing, and you say a different thing. Now we have a story. So if it comes to me, I can say, oh yeah, they've been asking that. Here's what I've said our policy is for most of our judges, or for all of our judges. Or the chief judge said that that would be the from PIO nightmare. The chief judge says our policy is X, but we called 9 judges and they had 4 different policies. I mean, I've never had that happen, thankfully, but maybe they're going to ask you statistics. Maybe they're going to ask a judge, so how come you had 22 misdemeanor bench trials last month, and everybody else had more than 50? There may be, you're not thinking, and you forget that you took time off, you forget that you had one trial that took a week, whatever, but those are the types of questions that if everything comes to one person, first of all, the person knows what the reporter's thinking about and talking about, where they're coming from, but also they can talk to everybody in the courts and make sure there's a coherent, consistent, and accurate answer to the question. So I would strongly support that. And reporters have many ways of there's the charming, oh, you're so helpful to me. We have to stick together, you and I, we know, and I know your judge can be kind of a pain sometimes. I'm here with you. What did they do yesterday? So there's like charming, there's sort of like, I don't have to go to the chief judge on this. Sort of threatening. I mean, there are many different ways. We had, years ago, and the person has now moved twice to different papers, but every time he called, I was the most helpful PIO in the country, and my chief judge was a brilliant jurist. Both are pretty close to true, but mentioning them every time. Okay. Crisis, sorry, do we have any questions? No, okay. Crisis communications. And this is something you do not know, you don't often have warning. If there's a big trial, you probably do know that. You know, there's a VIP, whatever, you're going to know that there's a lot of attention to it. But for instance, the biggest, or the most challenging, high-profile matter that we had in my court was when the singer Chris Brown, by the way, often known as Rihanna's ex-boyfriend, but anyhow, the singer Chris Brown was arrested on simple assault. Allegedly, he punched somebody. Actually, I forget the outcome, so I'll say allegedly he punched somebody. Like the radio stations are broadcasting. We didn't, like, literally it happened over a weekend, I think. So Monday morning, everybody's aware of it. We're just learning it. And some radio station said, I love this, come down and support Chris Brown. Unbelievable, the number of teenage girls we had. Like, oh my God. And like, there was the floor where our arraignment court is, there's sort of a narrow hallway, but people couldn't get through the hallway. Like families of people who were arrested who wanted to go see the arraignment of their person, they couldn't get through, like nightmare. You do not know when that's gonna happen to you tomorrow. I mean, granted, we're Washington, D.C., it's a city, a lot of people come through, but you do not know when that's gonna happen in your courthouse tomorrow, any sort of situation. So you need to be ready and have thought about this. So something happens, high profile trial or an incident in the courthouse, nature, whatever it is. Think about, and I tend to want to leap into action, think about who you need to notify. Take 1 minute and think, does my chief judge know, does my court administrator know, does the head of security know if they need to know? Is there a judge or judges who need to know? Who do I need to alert that this happened? Not the press, just who inside the courthouse or inside your team do you need to let know? Then, my approach especially when it's something involving a particular judge, like allegedly he or she ruled this way, or, was charged with this, or there's a complaint been filed, or whatever, get as much information as you can as soon as possible. I try to get the chief judge and the judge in question, if it's a judge, to sit down with me as soon as possible and just start at, you were born. Start at the very beginning, get all the facts, and then for you to know that, you're not going to tell it all, you're going to decide how much needs to be released, but you're going to make sure you don't lie, and it's just helpful, you don't want to happen to say, oh no, that didn't happen, and find out it did, because you didn't go through and get all the information. This a little bit conflicts with my next point, which is be thoughtful and act quickly. The longer it takes you to respond, the more it's going out on social media. Oh my God, did you hear the judge did this? Oh my God, a judge did this. And there used to be an ad for, I think it was Herbal Essence shampoo. She used this shampoo, and she told 2 friends, and she told 2 friends, and the screen would multiply from 4 to 16 to 30. Times 1,000, and that's how Twitter works and Facebook and social media. So if you don't get something out there pretty quickly, it's gone. The bus is out of control and you can't get at the brakes. You really need to stay ahead of the news, as we say it. And as I think I made clear, denying something that turns out to be true, then you've got 2 stories. The bad thing that happened and the fact that you denied the bad thing that happened and lied about it. So don't do that to yourself. Okay, so high-profile trials. We actually have a great website. Should this ever happen to you, it is up and running already. And it's an NCSC on their site, and it just is HPC, high-profile case. So CCPIO, which is the Organization of Court PIOs, we worked with NCSC, National Center for State Courts, and the National Judicial College on this website. It is very detailed, and the people who worked on it had handled the Kobe Bryant case in Colorado, Jerry Sandusky in Pennsylvania, I believe they participated. A woman from Connecticut who handled Michael Skakel, who was allegedly, he's now convicted. I can't remember the status of the case, but he was charged with killing a neighbor like 20 years ago. She also handled, there was a horrible home invasion case in Connecticut, as well as the Sandy Hook case. That shooting was in Connecticut. So they really have contributors. They really had very, people with a lot of experience contributed to that. And I think it's a really excellent site. Okay, so I say two cases that strike fear into the heart of every court PIO. This case is Bush v. Gore, yeah, a little while ago, but we have another election coming up. This right here, this is Craig Waters, one of our members, who had been on the job like a year, and all of a sudden he's handling like 300 cable satellite trucks out in front of, he's got news from around the world. And we now have many more, well, first of all, he's like, I wouldn't have had to come out and step on the steps and said something. We could have just posted it or tweeted it. And he said, somebody said that he reminded them of a cuckoo clock because every so often the doors would open and he'd pop out with news. So, and then the picture on the left are the California v. Simpson, which is why a lot of courts still don't have cameras in the courthouse. But these are kinds of things like Simpson, they knew the case was coming. Bush v. Gore, they might have known a week in advance, but I don't know that they could have known how significant it was going to be and how, I don't think you're ever ready for satellite trucks. Yeah, we have 2 or 3 every once in a while, and people say to me, oh, what's going on? But 200 satellite trucks. And by the way, just a point of sympathy, when O.J. Simpson, the first trial in the 90s, when that trial went on, they did not have website. When a filing came in, she had to make like 250 copies on a Xeroxer, okay, to give to all the press. So thank goodness for websites and faxing and emailing and scans. Okay, high-profile trials. Who do you need to coordinate with? Okay, you need to talk to the judge in the case. What is their policy going to be, assuming it's a case as opposed to an incident? What is the judge's policy going to be? Can you reserve seats? How many seats? Can the press come and go? You know, can they go out and tweet and come back? Can they tweet from the courtroom? I don't suggest it, but so you need to understand and think of all the different questions about reserved seats, about people coming and going. Can they check their email or not? Can they tweet? Can they take pictures? That doesn't seem like a good idea. But court recording or reporting or whatever your division is called. When we have a really high-profile case, we sometimes reserve a second courtroom, an empty courtroom, and have audio in the second courtroom. We don't have cameras, but we have our recording system broadcast into the courtroom. And then we have to get a courtroom clerk, but you get a courtroom and a courtroom clerk. And so then when the main courtroom is full, you say, go down to 301, you can hear audio. And some reporters actually prefer to be in that courtroom because they can text and tweet and whatever, whereas we don't allow that in the main courtroom. As I mentioned from the Chris Brown situation, you need court security. It depends if it's a major criminal trial or if it's just, 2 famous people or 1 famous person. But think about if there are going to be any security needs and how you handle it. And also talk to, hopefully you know your security officer well, but talk to them about how you want things handled in terms of if it's a high-profile defendant, are they going to be escorted in and out? Because not every defendant gets escorted in and out. I don't think you want that, but on the other hand, you don't want a mess in your courthouse. And so I would just talk to them. Do you allow reporters to interview? We don't allow interviews, but I literally have gone over with security. You can't say no asking questions. That's a fundamental free speech right. So of course they're going to say, did you do it? Or some stupid question where the lawyer's like, already told? The lawyer's probably just said, shut your mouth until you get out of the courthouse and probably until you get home. But you can't say to a reporter, you're not allowed to ask that. They're allowed to speak. So make sure that press security kind of understands handling press. I also send out, I put together a distribution list, an email distribution list of all the reporters interested in whatever matter, whatever case it is. And then I shoot an email out and I say, this is just for your planning purposes. Like I never want my email quoted, but I just say, just for planning purposes. The case starts at 9:30 tomorrow. If you have a reserved seat, you need to be there by 9:15. Tomorrow's just jury selection. If you don't want to be there, we think motions will start on Wednesday. As much logistical information, you could say, well, they should show up if they want to know what happens. Well, that's fine, but you have more people to deal with on more days if you do that. So think about that. The other thing is to make sure you're coordinating with prosecutor and defense, both sides. But occasionally we have, like, the prosecutor's mom wants to see closing arguments, or the supervisor does, or whomever. The defendant may have family. You need to make sure that you're consulting with them if you're doing reserved seating. And even if you're not, you need to reserve seating for, I think, for the family and for the prosecution team as well. Next, ideas to consider. Overflow courtroom, as I just discussed. Reserving seats for the press. Some people would say, oh, if they want seats, they should line up at 6 a.m. like everybody else, or whatever. That's a legitimate argument. My thought is the press convey information to thousands more people. So I would like to reserve them a seat. We always make sure that we also have seats for public. And also, I get them there early. I get them seated first, other than the parties come in. But I will coordinate with the courtroom clerk. Keep the doors locked until I get there. We agree on a time, and then I say, okay, now we're going to get the press. I call it loading the courtroom. But I'm like, now we let the press go in, and they go into their seats. And then I say, here are the rules. Yes, you can leave your seat to come back and tweet until and unless the judge says it's bothersome, at which point stop. Here's what's going to happen. Sometimes I sort of explain basic policy. Any rules about use of electronics. I also tell them, if you violate any of these rules, you lose your seat and we're not friends anymore. Like, I'm not defending somebody who gets their phone taken away from them for the duration of the hearing if I said don't use your phone. Because one of the things, sometimes security, in occasional cases in our court, security will take phones from people, like if it's a gang trial or something. They don't want any risk of pictures. That's a nightmare from a press perspective, because I've got 8 reporters who all need to be the first person who gets their phone so they can tweet the story. That's a nightmare from a press perspective. So I will say to security, will you let reporters, I'll give you a list, will you let those 8 people keep their phones off, not on and silent, and off in their pocket, in their purse, whatever, if I vouch for them. But so far, I've had one person from a national news program pull out a phone in a hearing, and they taped, or whatever, recorded a 911 call. I've never spoken to that person again, never. And not that they cover DC courts that often, but I will not. That was it was a violation of court rules and our agreement. I didn't let him know when the sentencing date was, nothing. And the irony, by the way, is that the 911 call was requested by another media outlet and handed out to everybody the following morning. one thing we've done only a handful of times is to have a web page with all the court documents on it. And I think there's I think they call it an orphan page. But the idea is there's not navigation to it, because you don't want to be conveying to the public that this case is important and the other cases aren't important. When your relative was killed, that's not important. But when their relative was killed, that's important. But certain cases get more press than others for whatever reasons. And so if you have a page with all the documents, it's very helpful to not have to repeatedly send. Everybody gets access at the same time. There's an advantage to it. As I said, I develop an email list. And I definitely, if there's a time change, whatever, you'd be surprised the questions you get. Why isn't there a hearing on Thursday? Well, somebody has a doctor's appointment. Somebody has outpatient surgery. I'm not telling you, but I'll just say, the lawyers had something, one of the lawyers had something they had to do. It happens a lot in jury trials. Why are we not, what happened? They think it's really significant. It turns out, somebody's mother was rushed to the hospital and that juror said they couldn't come in that day. So I try to convey what type of matter it is so they don't get suspicious, but so I'm not giving away confidential information, but I'm reassuring them that it's not some big, we're about to have a mistrial. I definitely would recommend, if you have one of these cases coming up and some amount of warning, to talk to, contact somebody who's in your state or in your region, or just reach out to CCPIO and talk to somebody who's handled a case like this before. There are, I'm sure, dozens and dozens of things that I haven't thought of to put in here. And usually with each case, I come up with, oh, I should have thought of that. The last thing, I guess, would be think about all the different rights that you're balancing, and not just rights, but sensitivities. And let's not make this a circus. Somebody's about to be sentenced maybe for life, and their parent's going to be in the room. So think about that, but also their defendants have constitutional rights to due process, a fair trial, et cetera, et cetera. Media has First Amendment rights, and if you check out, they have an absolute right to observe voir dire, from the U.S. Supreme Court. Crime victims' rights, also we had one case with 52 victims. That was a little hard to figure out that courtroom, because the victims have a right to be at the sentencing and to give victim impact statements. I strongly suggest you talk to your general counsel or get some sort of legal advice for this. Okay, part 2. Communicating effectively with the community. Website, really important. And one of the things I used to say, and we're now on, I think, our 4th website of the DC courts. Websites initially, or at least 2 or 3 websites ago for us, I told somebody our website was like a bad first date. Let us tell you how great we are. We're so great. Let us tell you all the great ways that we're great. It was all about us. It was all about our accomplishments. It also, you had to know that the small claims branch was part of the civil division, which is part of the DC Superior Court, which is technically the lower court. If you didn't know that, you had no idea where small claims was. We described each and every one of our branches. Quality assurance branch. Now that's really an important branch, right? Quality assurance, especially in criminal division, sentencing wrong, problem. You really want a good quality assurance branch. Does the public need to know? No, they don't. Don't point out that maybe a mistake was made in a courtroom. No, so think about what the public needs to know, not I want to make sure all of my employees feel good and they're mentioned on our website. No, that's for the intranet. Try to make sure your divisions keep their web pages up to date. They don't think about it. They think the website, that's Leah, or that's Jose, a colleague of mine. But we don't know that the civil division rules just changed, or that there's a new process, or there's a new form. So try to have a point person in each different division, or if you have multiple locations in each location, that keeps things up to date, because there's nothing the public hates more than, well, I looked at the website and it said X. Okay. Sorry, I lost a page. Okay, keep the website up to date. Use it to get your story out. People say, oh, the press doesn't do positive news. Look, a number of judges have said that. You're right, the press won't always do positive news. But you can put a story on your website. Like we have tons. We put up 5 stories at a time on our homepage and on our news page. There are stories we want people to know about. And so you use the means that you have available, and by the way, they're free, to get your story out. Website and social media. And I've put links here for the various social media outlets that we are on. Here's our website. By the way, the guy on the right is at the conference, right, Chuck? If you see Chuck, tell him he needs to smile in his next photo. Ron on the other side is smiling. That's great. But this is our overall website homepage. And what we have is those photos. There are 5 of them, and they rotate every 10 or 15 seconds. And I don't know if you can tell, but where it says DC Courts Navigator, and then Program, got cut off. But if you click, it says Learn More, and you can click on that. It goes to a story about that program. And the next one is a Mexican court delegation came and learned about our drug court. So the pictures, try to get them active. Don't ever have a picture of a document unless it's like the Constitution. You know, try to have action. Like it's challenging when you have like something new on your website or some new technical thing, but at least try to have a person using a computer so the picture grabs your attention. Question?
Yeah, did you design the website yourself, or did you bring in someone who's like an expert in it to help you redesign and update and make sure you're doing like the best modern? I think all 3 or 4, I forget how many times it is, we've had a consultant, or I don't know, contractor, something, who is an expert in websites, and they'll tell you things like you shouldn't have to, know that it's like, oh, I'm on DC Court, so let me pick Superior Court, let me pick Civil Division, let me pick Small Claims Branch. So like the how do I, that was also like focused, as opposed to let me tell you about, our great quality assurance branches. How do I do something? That's what people go to a website for. But they will tell you that you shouldn't have to do like more than 3 clicks. So if you can afford to have somebody design your website, and not design it, obviously you have to have an input and be part of it, but if you could have a firm that has expertise in that, or even just a contractor or a person who has expertise in that, I strongly recommend it. It will be a lot easier for the public to navigate. There is an expertise to this. It doesn't seem like it, but there really is, to how to make it how to make it easily navigable, to have search functions work effectively. There are a way to, this is way beyond my technical knowledge, but there are a way to tag pages so they come up in different searches. There really are ways to make it more effective. Okay, so some of the rules. Visually appealing, easy to navigate, no legal terms, and the last 2 points, make it easy to navigate, not just overwhelming people with information all at once, and think about, like my bad first date, don't just talk about yourself and how great you are, answer their questions, anticipate their questions. So I love this. This is literally a website screenshot. Like, really? Is it? You can see Amazon really knows what they're doing, right? Like, oh my God. So this is a screenshot of the Colorado courts. There are numerous courts who have, and all of them, no, numerous courts that have good websites. Just go search a couple. And again, the one down here, you can't even read it. So I'm going to talk social media. I'll go through this pretty quickly to get to then what I see as the advantages. Florida courts has sort of been at the vanguard of social media, and they may be the only court that is on Pinterest. I couldn't imagine. Exactly. That's exactly what I said. Are you kidding, Pinterest? Because I use Pinterest for one thing. I'm designing my dream house for my retirement. And if you see my Pinterest, that's all it is. It's like, I like this couch and this, yeah. Somewhere there's an app about how I could afford that.
They use Pinterest, and I remember thinking, they use Pinterest to put educational materials up, and so teachers can download them or whatever, can get materials there about the courts and use those for curricula. And that actually, to me, when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, there's a good idea. So see, you'd be surprised. So this is a summary, and I think this presentation will be online. But essentially, Twitter is for breaking news. I can't tell you how helpful it is if there's a snowstorm and your court's going to be closed, or Florida would say a hurricane and your court's going to be closed, flood. And also, when that happens, you get so many subscribers because A, they're all sitting home, and B, if you can do, like we had in DC a couple of years ago, Snowmageddon. Hashtag Snowmageddon. Like, you'll get people to see it. Use a hashtag. Also, by the way, if you use a picture, there are like rules of Twitter that you can go on Google and find. If you use a picture or a link, it gets much more attention, especially the picture. Facebook. Florida uses this, same us. Tell your story. You've got positive stories. Darn, the press won't cover them. Put them on your Facebook page. Okay? And then link to your website for more information. It's a way to drive attention to your website. Instagram. And I'm going to give you some examples to prove that this is true. But that's another way to get your story out, because there's a picture, but there's a caption. So get a picture that is going to be interesting to people, and they'll read your caption. It's also a way to get to another, dare I say it, generation. Different group, a different demographic. You know, as I said, my son, email, he thinks Facebook is kind of old-fashioned. It's like for people my age. Right. Instagram, by the way, if we could do our, you know, the court could go on Snapchat, then I'd like have his attention. So think about it though, like you want to get to all sorts of different people with your message, so think about using this. And I will say, if you have a court that doesn't have social media and your chief judge is thinking, I don't want you posting on Twitter like, wow, traffic was bad on the way to work today. Show him or her other courts' Twitter accounts and how well, you know, we've got, I think, close to 3,000 subscribers. Florida, I think, on Twitter has 14 or 15,000. Reporters are all on Twitter, all. YouTube, we put videos of like Adoption Day, but videos that explain how to use our case search function, and then our YouTube page is called the DC Courts Channel. So people can just go to that page and see different tutorials, but also different events. And lastly, I explained about Pinterest. So now let's see how it looks. So the nation's drug czar, by the way, a title they never seem to like, but what everybody calls them, they did a story about, CBS 60 Minutes did a story about drug courts. They interviewed the drug czar, and then he had them, as part of that, go to a DC drug court graduation that he attended and spoke at. So that, you know, we then got that onto our website so people would know, like, we have national prominence. People look to how our drug court functions. They were right. There was a court employee who was injured, doesn't begin to cover it, horribly injured by one of those like construction site dump trucks, those huge, massive industrial. Yes, horribly injured, she could have bled out. She literally could have. These 4 U.S. Marshals who serve as our like bailiffs or sheriffs, you know, prisoner transport, they were like coming back from lunch, came upon the scene, stopped the car, jumped out, tourniquet, whatever. She was alive because of these guys. And we did several things for them, but this was the Redskins did something. Like, what a positive story, other than, obviously, it was a tragedy for the woman involved who is still employed at the courts and doing well. But that's the kind of good news stories that you know, can post on Facebook. You can tell your positive news. Twitter. We used to do, hold on. This year we did Facebook Live. We used to do this on Law Day on Twitter, and we'd have people ask questions. This year I got the woman who was my assistant, Jasmine on the far left, to talk to our 2 chief judges, appellate court, trial court. And just ask them questions. You know, what was your career like? What are your hardest decisions? What do you like about your job? Things that we thought the public, you know, not what did you think of the decision by the Supreme Court, which wouldn't have been appropriate anyway, but nobody cares what they think. Like, you know, it's not, discussing a legal decision is not interesting. Have a conversation. She did a great job. It's still on our YouTube channel if you're interested. What we used to do is a Twitter chat, which I think they thought, my chief judges thought was a crazy idea. I did, by the way, get a law school ready with questions in case other people didn't ask them. But you can just set up a time where you're going to have a chat on a particular topic. It's also, as I said, weather news, scheduling issues, Twitter. YouTube, you can upload, like there's a way, because you can't put them as your videos, but there's a way to upload a news story that you like, if, like a drug court graduation or adoption day. You can put them on, there's like a page for added videos. But you can get your story out there by posting a video, adoption day, you know, new pro se clinic, new court facility, whatever. Instagram. My assistant, Jasmine, who was on the far left, my former assistant, suggested this when she started, I think, 2 years ago, and I thought, oh, it's so cute. You just graduated from college. You like Instagram. But I don't want to be that kind of person. So I said, well, why don't you draft a proposal, and we'll present it to the court administrator and the 2 chief judges of why this would be helpful. She did a great job showing, and they agreed to a trial. And it's gone great. I want to show you the kind of pictures, like how fabulous. First of all, this dog. I love this dog. We have a program for teens that have been either at risk of or have been sexually trafficked. He's a assistance, I think, a comfort animal. The kids love him, but like, okay, is that the best photo ever? Like, how many courts get to post cute dog photos? Above juvenile probation officers, we had a career college fair. They wore their college T-shirt that day. And this is just like the world's best adoption day picture, I think. A family treatment court, which is like drug court for moms in danger of losing their kids, a graduation. And then down here is the DC Courts booth at a community festival. Next, I did this graphic. It's by no means perfect, but I just got a list of all the languages that we translated in the first 6 months of the year and got the flags of those countries. This right here, I said never post a document. This will be our exception. It's the marriage certificate, the marriage application and license for Richard and Mildred Loving. The Lovings successfully sued the state of Virginia they sued because Virginia wouldn't allow them to get married. So there's like several movies out about this. What did they do? They came to DC where we would let them get married because he was white and she was either black or Native American or both. Anyhow, they came to DC, they got married in 1960-something, and somebody a couple years ago, and our family division director said, well, then we should have a copy of that license. Got a copy, framed it, it's up in our marriage bureau. So to me, that was worth it. When you're thinking community outreach, so moving from what you do in-house on social media or website, think about also events. What can you hold? What can you attend? Formal events, adoption day, some sort of information fair or open house. Think about timing if you're going to invite the press. 4:30 Friday, bad time. Have speakers keep their remarks brief. 15 minutes, no. 2 to 5. It's not a judicial decision. Questions and answers afterwards, good. Free food and drink is a sell anywhere. Try to do a press packet. Have a packet with a press release, maybe some data. Like on adoption day, we have a list of how many kids were adopted in DC that year, how many were out of foster care, how many kids in foster care are they looking for homes for, that kind of information, but just so that people can write an effective story. More informal ways, have an open house at local meetings. Our police districts each have community meetings. Are there neighborhood watch meetings? We have advisory neighborhood commissioners, they have meetings. Like, just think of what groups already meet that you could go to, or invite people in. Like, we've done a lot with school groups, and I know there are programs that are, Marianne and Jeff both talked about these on Monday. Schools like to go on field trips. The kids learn a lot. They're sitting on a bench and or in a jury box, or being the prosecutor or the defense attorney teaches you a lot more than reading about it in a textbook, or worse. Or sort of the alternative is they're going to learn about it on CSI or one of those shows where my biggest thing is they always say, oh, we'll file a motion, and the next thing you hear, our hearing is tomorrow. Yeah. So please, there's a lot of education that can happen. Okay, let's go to outreach ideas. This is, the first bullet is actually a caption. It's a DC judge at a neighborhood, and a defense attorney I can see there too, at a neighborhood meeting. And one of the things I try to tell, and this is something we learned at our the CCPIO conference last year, it's a good idea to listen. And judges never have anybody in the courtroom say, okay, that's enough, now I'll talk. They don't really try to diplomatically convey. Like, listening is really a good skill, and it's appreciated, even if you think what the person's saying is, like, the fact that you will take the time to listen says a lot. So we occasionally have judges go and teach, like, a high school class, not for a semester, but for an hour. But, you'll never know. We got asked how much you make, which is actually public knowledge. So you get some, like, out there questions, but you also display. I mean, part of all of the message I want to convey with the different things that I'm doing on website, community meetings, press release, events. Judges are normal people. They really are, and they're happy to interact with you in a certain way. So I think sort of meeting people in person conveys that a lot. This is more school groups interacting. Kids love sitting on that bench. They love a gavel, which, by the way, I've never seen a judge use a gavel on CSI, I'm sure. But get out into the community. We have, I think, the tent that you saw a couple under Instagram. It says DC Courts on it, cost a couple $100. It has our seals on it. But we have information for people, and so we'll go to a neighborhood festival or fair where they have booths, and they have a lot of booths where they're selling, jewelry or food or whatever, but crafts. But they also usually have a section for nonprofits and/or government agencies, and people are, first of all, like, oh my God, you're here, and then they'll ask a question. Often it's about jury duty, but the biggest hit has been the piece of paper we have about free legal help and our pro se clinics. So I strongly suggest that. Some courts have a speakers bureau, judges who are interested in and good at speaking to the public. So if there's a community meeting, they know who they can ask. Here we go. Seek public input. Again, listening. When we developed our strategic plan in DC, we asked for public input. We had a little survey card for everybody who came in 1 week. The people on the upper left, people had T-shirts that said, you be the judge. It's like, you be the judge, how good are we doing? And in the bottom picture, this man is our Court of Appeals, the highest court in DC. This is our former chief judge at the time, Eric Washington, and so he was there helping people, fill them out and, answering questions. We have a new thing, we have a court navigator program to help people figure out where they need to be and what paperwork needs to be done. And it's near our 2 highest volumes, small claims and landlord-tenant, 2 highest volume courtroom. And it's called Court Navigator Program. They told me they were going to have a clinic. And I said, that's great. That sounds like a really boring thing, a clinic. Who wants to go to a clinic? Let's call it a pop-up. Because I keep hearing about, like, pop-ups, neighborhood pop-ups, or, So we call it Court Pop-Up and hashtag pop-up. And they have the Office of Tenant Advocate who's here answering questions. And there are some questions they can answer or advice they can give that we can't give as a court or as a court employees. Department of Mental Health, about services they offer. there are agencies out there, you can invite them in, and especially if you have a high-volume courtroom, they'll be happy that they're going to have that many people to file by, that much traffic. Okay, community outreach. It's a way of getting accurate information out to the public. As you all know, I don't even know why I put this bullet in there, public trust and confidence is that is our foundation. That's what we need. And this is just an essential part, I think, of building public trust or enhancing, maintaining public trust and confidence. The media, however you define it, is still the biggest purveyor of information. And you need to figure out how to deal with reporters and how to use social media to get, and the advantage of social media is you get directly to your people. You don't have to go through a reporter. So think about that. And as I said, be honest and forthcoming. Hiding bad news destroys trust with the press, which is not going to help you with the public, to say the least. And then you have two stories. What bad happened and how you tried to cover it up. Overview. Think from a reporter's point of view. Think from the public point of view. Treat both of them with the respect that you'd want and the honesty and as much openness as possible. And lastly, be creative. If you just think, well, we posted it on our website on the press page. Does anybody know the press page is there? Have you emailed it? Have you called anybody and told them about something? Are you on social media? How many different ways can you get something out there? And then my final word, and we'll be happy to take questions, is if you have a court PIO, I strongly encourage you to keep them informed of what's going on. Trust them, assuming that they're proof trustworthy and they won't pass the word along. It really helps if they're informed. And there is truly, not to pat myself too, or ourselves too much on the back, there is actually a skill to dealing with press, to understanding their deadlines. We know the reporters, we may have a sense of who would do the story. We have a sense of like, well, what we want to do is get it first in the newspaper and the TV will pick it up because then we can do this with it. Like there's somewhat of a science to this. We're now a group of 130 professionals. So if you do not have if you have a PIO, tell them to join. If you don't have a PIO, but you do PIO functions, please get in touch with us. You can be an associate member. We're happy to have you with us. We have a conference. It's in 2 weeks. Still room if you want to come. But there's a lot of information to share, and we live by the theory that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So if you have a good law school for journalists, I can copy it. So I want to thank you very much. I think we're out of time. Are we out of time? Yes. Sorry about that. If you have any questions, I'm here. Mary Ann is here from Las Vegas, Clark County. And Jeff is here from Utah. We'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention.